Welcome. We're here at my Soulful Recovery Summit. I'm working to empower men and businessmen to overcome their addictions and mental health issues. And we're here with Ryan Bean, ketamine, breathwork, yogi. And Ryan, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly, certainly. Well, I think we use this term, our path to awakening, and I think that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. And mine started about almost 15 to, I think we're at 16, 17 years ago. After I departed the military, I was in the Navy for 10 years as a physician, served six deployments to many places that were hostile, at least at the time. This was in the early to late 90s. And when I got out, I was served up with a nice acronym, which was PTSD. And I was served up with that through my time while I was in. Didn't really feel it necessarily, just happened to know that was what I was doing, my duty. When I got out, I went back to school. I got my master's degree in clinical mental health. I just wanted to be out of physical. I wanted to be out of medicine. I wanted to be more in the mental aspect of it because I knew that I was struggling with that for myself. Um, when I finished my master's, I just wasn't ready to practice. I was still healing. So I moved to India for 2 years, placed myself in an ashram and lived and worked as a Swami in northern India, in Rishikesh, India, and Varanasi, India. And really just helped the people there. I mean, I think when I moved there, I kind of told myself a statement, and this was before I really had, I guess I had just barely dipped my toes in the path to awakening. I had, attended a few yoga classes and was kind of dabbling with law of attraction based principles, and but I really wasn't all that awakened, if you will. I just wanted to learn. I knew there was more to this life than I had been taught. And so I spent most of my time in India helping children and doing small things with medicine, stitches here and there, giving kids nutrition, or just really just being present. Most of it was really my own healing. I think that's kind of what I've found, at least from that point forward, is all we can really do is work on ourselves in hopes to benefit the society around us. We would like to say we can change the world, but really the world is us. And when we work on ourselves, and if everyone worked on themselves, then we would certainly have a better place to live. So that's really all I did. As I said, I'm going to work on me. And I came back and I became, I'd already gone through some mini yoga trainings. I went through a 200-hour training. I went to another 300-hour training and another 300-hour training. I did two Vipassanas, which are 10-day silent meditations, and spent them going inward. When I came back to the United States, I learned a little bit more about breath work. And so then I had returned to India the following year, studied in an area near Pakistan in a Buddhist monastery, Tumo, and some other breathwork techniques, along with yogic pranayama. After that tour of India, I was only there a few months that time, came back and I became interested in the Wim Hof method. Began doing more breath work with Wim Hof and getting into deliberate cold exposure, became an instructor for many years. And then ended up connecting with a friend of mine named Jesse Coomer, and I developed something called the language of breath. And that's where I spoke my TED Talks on, was about our philosophy of awareness, and that it's more than techniques. It's really about being the observer of thoughts, feelings, emotions, rather than some technique that's going to fix you. Now, in the meantime, I went back into work into a clinic, which is a ketamine psychotherapy clinic, and began as a psychedelic guide, where I created ketamine breathwork, which is a protocol to use breathwork and ketamine together in a way to inhibit digestion and to allow the participant to be more as a, let's say, navigator of the experience rather than a passenger of the experience. Many times in the ketamine world or in other psychedelics, you feel like you're being dragged into the experience as a passenger, or kind of an unwanted passenger, really, sometimes. And that particular protocol makes you and the navigator of the experience. So, along with that and many other things, I do teach yoga. I teach a lot of breath work on many different online sources, apps, and so forth, along with a retreat leader. And I do a thousand things with my own podcast, my books, and I do a lot of public speaking. But a lot of my work is revolved around men's work and veterans work. Um, I have a nonprofit with some partners of mine called Visionary Veterans, and we host retreats every year for veterans who are suffering from PTSD.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So today I'm kind of interested in like I'm in recovery, but what about somebody who knows we're we're aware of our problem, but maybe we're denying it. Um, and is there any general practices that we can start or I
Sure,
don't know.
sure. Yeah, no, I can elaborate on that. I mean, there's so many practices, but I would like to emphasize that everything that I may talk about in the next few months, these are all just tools, and we can certainly become addicted to our tools also. So we have to keep that in mind is when we're doing practices, we're immediately labeling what we think is bad and what we think is good. And most of the time when we think it's bad, we shame ourselves for it, which really creates a whole cycle of self-deprivation that we don't want. What I'd rather focus on with that is saying, we live on this path of our karmic path, and karma doesn't mean good or bad. What karma really means is action or inaction. And so sometimes we're called to make a change in our life, take action, or sometimes we're called to not take action. But each one of those comes with a consequence. So, and furthermore, our tools that we use, let's say I talk about breath work or ice exposure, these are all just simply tools. I've seen people who are addicted to coming to yoga, and that is their vice. Their vice, they think that that will be what saves them. That's the reason why they're no longer X, whatever that X is. And so, my belief is that all these are really tools to help us to work on ourselves, but we can't get caught in the illusion that we need those to survive. Many people will be like, I need my medication to be okay, or I need my cigarette to be okay, or I need my ice bath every day, or I need my meditation to be okay. And that is simply a mindset. Yogis believe in five bodies. We call them the koshas. And the koshas say, I'm taking myself from my physical body. That's what I see every day. Go past the mental body, go into the pranic body where the breath and the heart rate and the chakra system lives. Go beyond that to channel four, which is the higher self, the Vijnana Maya kosha, and work into a place where I feel blissful. And blissful sometimes comes in the form of little pills or drinks in a cup. That's sometimes what it feels like. It feels blissful because your current state in your human body feels uncomfortable. So we have to take away the illusion that something is bad or right or wrong. Where it becomes an addictive quality, and when we give it that negative connotation, is when we begin to hurt others or we start to really hurt ourselves. Okay, so you can be in bliss and still hurt others, right? You can still be in bliss and hurt yourself. And so, what usually I find, especially as it relates to recovery, is that we have a decrease happening in our dopamine levels, meaning our our life is not finding these points of satisfaction. We're not finding satisfaction in a way that we feel completely whole. Maybe there's not the uptick in dopamine from an event or a thing or something that we do where our lives are not quite satisfactory. Give you an example. When I came back from the military and I was in my, in my taking my master's degree, I I was drinking almost every night socially because I lived in Orlando, Florida, where I could walk to the different bars, restaurants, and it was very much a social thing where we had Taco Tuesday, Wine Down Wednesday, Thirsty Thursday. You had Friday and Saturday, which you needed to go out. Friday was like Bloody Marys and burgers. And then, well, here we are. Maybe I'll not drink on Monday. We'll see what happens. And it never felt like an addiction at that time. What it felt like was this is real life. This is what life really is, right? And this is what people do because it's socially accepted. Well, what I found when I moved to India was I lived in a town that didn't have any alcohol, didn't have any meat. You know, it was a very holy town. And so we didn't have those things to lean on, if you will. And I became intoxicated by what they would call Ishwara, which is really God. Ishwara is like nature and all the things that are your source. I
Mm,
became intoxicated by that because I wanted to learn the truth. And one of the tools that taught me truth was getting into cold water. Because what happened is when I started to get into deliberate cold exposure, I felt this feeling of fear, which feels like normal life, anxiety and fear. I felt my heart rate raise and I felt my breath. And then as I sat there and breathed and down regulated, it felt like how I wanted to respond in my life. Instead of being drawn away by a chemical substance or drawn away by an experience, what I was doing was I was consciously down regulating my alchemy. So the parts of me that felt fear, my endocrine system, which was producing all these chemicals, I began to feel them on a very on an awareness level. So breath work, first of all, amazing tool for doing this to really feel this uptick of adrenaline and cortisol and all the things that really stress us out, and then down regulating them through breath work. And deliberate cold exposure does the same thing, but maybe in a more extreme level. You get 300% increase in dopamine. You know, you get these magical lifts of adrenaline, and when you're when you're satisfying or balancing your alchemy through these tools, there's no need to add something else. Now, I wouldn't say that I went into recovery necessarily, but I am not a daily drinker. I'm not even a monthly drinker anymore. I'm not even I'm like an annual margarita when I go to Mexico. You know, that's about it. And it's because I'm celebrating being in Mexico, whatever. But I don't have the same desires because my alchemy has been balanced. And I think that's where we need to look at ourselves as saying, well, where do I feel the imbalance? And most people can't answer that. They haven't asked themselves on a very conscious and unconscious level. They haven't said, well, where am I lacking in my life? What do I need to feel fulfilled? What is my purpose? And yogis would call this their dharma. But most people don't know what their purpose is, and so they say, well, I don't know, maybe I don't have a purpose, maybe my life is just to live and then to die. And I would urge them, if I were their therapist, say, no, you do have a purpose. You do. Ask in the right environments and you will receive inspired action. It's just you haven't been guided. And this is not something we teach in school. This is not something that we learn. Even as adults, we don't really understand. And then when someone comes to us and says, well, you need to go to yoga or do meditation, I don't want to do that woo stuff. That's not for me. Well, of course it's not, because you spent the last 50 years of your life self-deprecating, self-intoxicating and avoiding getting to know you. But when you get to know you, these tools make sense. You're like, yeah, I want to get to know who this soul is underneath all of this skin. I want to understand who that is. And so there's many, many tools, whether it be, I take people into sweat lodges, I take people into the ice, I take people into nature, and I take people into psychedelic experiences to get to know them. And I think we need to, because we are talking about recovery, I need to make a firm, definitive answer, because many would say, well, you're using drugs to get off drugs, that doesn't make sense. And I would caution them. I mean, one of my greatest teachers is a gentleman named Ram Dass, and Ram Dass definitely was a pioneer in psychedelic therapy in the 1960s and 70s. And I'll answer it almost the same way he would. There's a big difference between narcotics and tryptamines, massive. Narcotics and tryptamines are not the same. Tryptamines are essentially the helicopter ride to the top of the mountain, and then you go down to the bottom of the mountain and you have to climb the mountain again. Fairly non-addictive. Under the right guidance, the right set and setting, you can have a magical, mystical, like to biblical proportions experience with God, source, universal energy. come back knowing that you have a purpose. Narcotics, quite a bit different, quite a bit different. They become a place of self-deprecation. They become a place of really harming oneself. Whereas I do not feel the same thing happens if tryptamines are taken on a in a ceremonial dose with a guide. Essentially you're attending church. I mean, that's really what it is. And I take people to church often.
Amazing. Can you elaborate a little more on the ketamine therapy? Just a little bit.
I can talk about ketamine therapy. Yeah, I mean, ketamine psychotherapy is a great way to be a disruptor of patterns. It works as an antagonist. It works to block signals which are coming from telomere to telomere on the neurons, and some of those neurons are firing messages like "I can't," "I won't," "I'm helpless," "I don't have enough resources," whatever those are. As a therapist, I like to guide people in a disassociative state to new desired outcomes. Now, ketamine is not the fixer, it is the disruptor of signal and disruptor of pattern. What we need to do after we have that disruption is to create new routines, habits, even relationships that support that new image of who is wanted or what is wanted. I use some techniques called quantum jumping, and I use something called the Silva method to types of meditation to begin to help people disrupt those and find in a quantum realm the version of themselves that they want to be. Because many of us live a life that has been created by default rather than by deliberate creation. So deliberately creating your life says, I'm taking control of this and I'm going to find the version of me that I want. I want to be an artist or a photographer or a painter, or I want to learn to play the guitar or whatever it is that you want to do, which we'll go back to dopamine, increases dopamine levels. You're learning something, you're playing something, you're feeling fulfilled. And those are the things. But ketamine psychotherapy works as a disruptor, and it tends to be really well received, especially in clients who have extreme levels of lack of stimuli, dopamine, maybe have been going through treatments and are treatment resistant. That's a term. If they found three different forms of treatment that didn't work for them, that would be called treatment resistant. Someone who maybe is having ideations of taking their own life. Those are also areas in which ketamine can work and can be very successful if the participant is willing to, well, participate. If they're not willing to participate, it's really just an experience to get out of their body for a few minutes and come back. And for those patients, I would say, it may take them up to 6 sessions to really find success. And it's not a guaranteed. I would say all psychedelics are not the same. I mean, ketamine works in the glutamate system, whereas if we were to talk about psilocybin or LSD, those work more on the serotonin levels. And there's other ones that work on the opiate system. And so it's a matter of sitting with someone and saying, what is it that we're working with here? Do we need to reprogram something? Do we need to create some more fulfillment in your life? Do you need community? Do you need support? Do you need a purpose? And where, all of them are not the same. So most of the time when I'm sitting with women, I'll have a different sort of more divine feminine aspect of me that I provide within the meditations, within the tools that we offer. Whereas I'm sitting with a veteran, I may be have more data from my own experience that I'll say, well, let's tune into this because I had that same experience and we're battle buddies together, going through this together, So it's a different sort of camaraderie that happens. The ketamine is a great tool, but it is not the only tool. It's not the only tool that could work. So it does work really well, even in for addiction. But sometimes I find that once we've disrupted those patterns, that really what's needed is additional stimuli from just brain activity, creating neuroplasticity afterward. So maybe we might find that in ice bathing. We might find that in breath work. We might find that in just simply allowing them to do some manifestation tools that I offer through meditation and creating the life that they want. And even if it's small, I mean, let me emphasize that. So many people will come to me and say, yeah, I don't want to be sad anymore. I want to have more money so I can pay my bills. I need about it. I mean, I don't know. I need like $6,000 this week, and I need $1 million this year, and I need a new car, and I would love a new girlfriend. And, they come to me all these things, and then you ask them to manifest, and they can't quite pinpoint or hone in on what is wanted. They say, I have all these things, and it becomes very overwhelming. And so, as a guide and a therapist, I try to take people down a path that's very specific for one application at a time, because we don't get overwhelmed. So we can say, okay, let's work on this relationship thing first, because maybe that might be the root of your money issues or your low self-esteem or whatever those things. Let's work on what's happening here, and let's rewrite that story and find success. And then let's find success in the other thing. So if someone were to sit with me, I can't guarantee a a massive result in one session. It usually takes some time and takes some patience to say, okay, well, I'm gaining a little bit each week that I meet with Ryan. I'm gaining a little bit every time I go. And it's always going to be about, does this feel good or does this not feel good? And always lean towards what feels good. A lot of times our relationships, our job, all these things, they don't feel good, but we do them anyway because we think we're supposed to do them. And then we come home and we're like, I just want to feel good. So we reach for the cup, we reach for the drink, we reach for something to disassociate from the whole day that's felt bad. What if you had little successes throughout the day? You had little things that you were like, wow, I didn't react the way I normally would. What if in the morning when I got up, I got in an ice bath and I felt shot out of a shotgun? I felt amazing. I felt good in my body. That's a little success. And so you start your day with momentum rather than midday having a crash and you throw some caffeine in your body, hoping to get by. This is a pattern that keeps us locked in what is rather than what is wanted.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you talk about ice baths, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, it's kind of scares me to death. Um, my son-in-law has one, I don't know, it's at like 40 degrees. Um, help me overcome that that block
Yeah.
that's stopping me from jumping in that ice bath. Because it sounds like the results are amazing.
Yeah, I would say that is probably the best tool that I use for in recovery, or at least for my experience and for what I've taken people into. But let me give you an example, and I don't know if the listeners are, see my face here, but I want you to imagine you are getting into an ice bath right now. Okay, so there you are, you're standing at the water, and the thoughts are saying it's going to be cold. I'm not going to like this, right? that's that's you thinking and then feeling it rather than feeling it and thinking about it. So you've already jumped ahead into the future, right? That creates anxiety. You've already jumped ahead of what you
Right.
think is going to happen because we have experience, right? When you get in and you feel the initial shock, what do? You hold your breath, and then you hold yourself and you, right? And you're not allowing CO2 to be released. That is a mechanism that our unconscious self immediately will do because it's, guess what? It's trying to keep you alive. It's saying, hold yourself because you don't feel safe. And that in turn is making your heart rate go fast and is in turn making you consume more oxygen and produce or release less CO2, which creates a stress on the body. When you realize what's happening chemically and physically, you realize that your unconscious self is just trying to keep you alive. It's saying that we need to close off these valves that go down to the legs and arms because we can live without those. And we need to keep the torso warm blood here. And we need to keep the heart rate going. Otherwise, it will stop because we just went into cold water. So when you think of what's happening as love rather than punishment or discomfort, the whole world changes. Now, so I start at the shore, or I get into natural bodies of water here in Utah when It's cold enough, and then I get into ice baths, and I take a lot of people. I've taken tens of thousands of people into ice baths. We do something called Ice Church here every month, and I have a couple different other things where I take people into different ice baths. But when you stand at the edge, what's really most important is not thinking about what will happen, but what is happening. So, what is happening is your mindset is saying, I can't, I won't, it's going to be so hard.
Mhm.
What if you stood at the shore and said, I will go in, I'm going to be in there for 3 minutes, and it may not be fun, it may be a little uncomfortable, but it's temporary. Just like my anxiety, temporary. Just like my anger, temporary. Just like my happiness can be temporary. Just like my joy, just like frustration, all these things are temporary. And if I look at that as just another moment of discomfort that I will feel better afterward in having, think about this. When you have to have a difficult conversation with your employer, it's uncomfortable. It sucks. It creates anxiety. You sweat. You feel stress. You're like, you're asking for a raise, and you feel uncomfortable and fearful. And what if they don't like it? What if they fire me? But if you say, I'm going to do it because I deserve the raise, and when you leave that office and you've gotten the raise that don't you feel amazing? You feel fantastic. You feel so fulfilled and success because your dopamine levels shot through the roof. Serotonin begins to secrete through your body. And you go, wow, I did it. And I'm so proud of myself.
Mhm.
Same thing happens when you're like, you have a difficult conversation with your partner about, something uncomfortable at home, or, the finances or whatever. The same thing. This is a metaphor for life, Jeff. This is, I mean, when we stand at the shore of an ice bath, all we're doing is taking life in a metaphor and saying, that is going to teach my body when I feel this way again in other situations that I can and I will. There's a big difference between motivation and dedication. I can be motivated all day long to drive over to the ice bath. Dedication is saying, I don't want to get in, but I'm going to because I know that I will feel better afterward. And so you get dedicated to your own healing. You say, I choose to feel better today. I choose to not distract, avoid, or run away. I choose to face what sucks head on, and I'm going to come out feeling better, better than before. Each day, I'm getting better and better and better. I'm not healed, but every day I get better and better and better. And that is why we get in the ice baths. We get in it because we know that we're on this path. We know we want to feel better. We want to be better for ourselves, for our families, for our jobs, for our friends. We want to be a better human. None of us are perfect. None. We all have our imperfections, and that's what we're here to learn, is how to sort of clean up that karmic path through these tools that really will help heal us. They really, it's all about the mind. I mean, it's our mind is telling us all the things we can't do. It's telling us all the things that we're inadequate in. And I will tell you, even through all these tools, all of them, breathwork, meditation, ice bathing, sweat lodges, psychedelic, all of them, none of my neuroses have really changed, right? The same stuff that it was me 15 years ago is still there. But what I've created is space between what is thought and what is felt. I didn't have that before. It was like, I think it, I immediately feel it. Now I can sit back through awareness and say, what's actually happening here? My heart rate's going fast. Is that an anxiety attack? No, that's me feeling noradrenaline from the locus coeruleus. It's these neurons that sit on top of my head. That noradrenaline makes me feel anxious. Anxiety actually helps me create focus in my life. I need that. I need to be uber focused at this time. And I feel a little uncomfortable, but that's okay because I know it's temporary. That's the space I'm talking about here. Rather
Mhm.
than saying I must react to this feeling. It's kind of like when someone cuts you off in traffic and you go, I must flip them off. I must honk my horn. I must let them know my anger.
Mhm.
When you really know that you've become an alchemist for yourself is when that happens and you go, I don't need to tell them that I'm angry. I'm just going to be angry for a second and then I'm going to shake it off.
Right.
I don't need to express that because they're long gone by now, unless you're a road rager, and that's a whole nother set of problems. But the person who did that is just going through their own stuff, man. They might be running to the hospital, they might be running to the bar. We don't know, and it doesn't matter. They're just going through their own series of stuff, just like you're going through your own series of stuff. And when we become the observer of these things, we realize we're a global community. And what are we spending time and emotion on frustration? No, I'm going to choose to go towards what feels good. And in those moments, I put on a podcast that feels good, or I'll put on a music that feels good, because I choose to turn towards what feels good rather than let myself be consumed by anger, fear, frustration, and doubt. I choose to go towards happiness.
Powerful. I'm taking an ice bath later on today.
Nice.
Oh Lord. That's a challenge, by the way. So I watched your TED Talk and you talked about the soldier's technique.
Yep.
Um, I was kind of curious, and maybe you could lead us through that first.
Yeah, the soldier's technique is a good technique to use. I mean, there's so many, and again, we kind of talked about at the beginning that all these are just techniques, and not all of them will work the same. The soldier's technique is a really good one to use while if you're walking, moving, you need to be moving, and that's why I use that one. But if and this is just really using your steps and counting. So usually this would be a longer exhale with a not quite short inhale, but you could do 3 counts in, 6 counts out. But I'm utilizing my steps, so I'm using my hands here. 1, 2, 3, and then out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In 1, 2, 3. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm lengthening my exhale as I step.
Mhm.
Great way to do it if you have to be moving, but really the fastest way to down regulate, there's something called the cyclical sigh, which is a really amazing technique, which is shown to down regulate cortisol levels in the body. And this is just a double inhale. So you would breathe in, hold it at the top, take another breath in just to fill it up a little bit more. Now release it slower than you brought it in. Just release slow with a sigh. When you get to the bottom, take another one, breathe all the way into the top, fully in, hold it, take another sip in, release it slower than you brought it in. Once you feel like you sort of got a hold on the stress or whatever's happening, then start to move into something called the cadence of bliss. Breathing in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Now hold. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Now exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Breathe in for 4. Into the nose, into the belly, let it rise, let it hold at the very top, release the shoulders, relax here, 7 counts, 5, 4, 3, 2, exhale for 8, all the way down. 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can go back to your normal breath. But these are just techniques we use in the language of breath to help down regulate and create space and to connect to our unconscious self. The cadence of bliss is a really good one. If you wake up, that's the 4, 7, 8, and you have insomnia, a really great way of down regulating. Cyclical sigh is a really good one if you have a lot of stress. So you're eliminating cortisol, which creates that feeling of stress. And when we realize that the breath is a tool to help us self-regulate, man, that feels empowering, right? When you feel like, wow, I just learned something that I can use. Now, we only just did a couple of minutes here, but really it takes about 2 minutes to affect the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system looks at things, stimuli through the vagus nerve that create things like our heart rate. That's the autonomic nervous system. It tells us our heart rate, tells our breath respirations. It affects our reproductive organs. In my TED talk, I talk about the caveman standing at the cave and all the things the caveman is going through. And these are all automatic processes. Well, the thing is we're not standing at the cave, thinking the saber-toothed tiger is going to attack us anymore. The saber-tooth tiger is our employment, it's our sales quota, it's our relationship, it's our frustrations with our father. It's these are what those things are, and we have not yet evolved in our nervous system away from the same things that were affecting us as cave dwelling ancestors. So if we haven't evolved our nervous system, we're still needing to regulate that. So you imagine if you have a hard day, what do? We come home and we, I'm home, and that feels good. We do that automatically. Well, because our unconscious self knows that we need that extra oxygen and that longer CO2 release with that longer exhale to be able to release the stress of CO2. We need that. And so our body automatically, it's within our DNA, it's written in code that we do that automatically. Same thing when we get into the ice bath where we hold our breath because we're in a place of stress. It's the same metaphoric concept. We're just applying it. So we're teaching our unconscious self that, hey, thank you for your help. Thank you for the stimuli, but I got this. I got this today. And we can take over our autonomic nervous system, which for many years we called it automatic because we didn't think we could control it. And I think control is maybe too harsh of a word. Regulate is a better word. But we can regulate it and really become our own healer. I mean, there's a poet. His name is Young Pueblo. I'm just going to say his poem because I was about ready to paraphrase it, but let me just tell you his poem. Young Pueblo, he wrote a poem, and it says, "True power is living the realization that you are your own hero, healer, and leader. Those with true power do not hurt themselves or others, but they embody and embrace everything with love." And that's really how we become our own superhero. We become powerful by becoming our own healer, and leader, not seeking outward validation, knowing that everything that we need, we already have within us. I simply offer tools. I don't call myself a healer. I don't call myself any of those things. I say I'm a creator. Here's the tools that I use to create with. If you like them, cool, use them. If the ones that you don't like, don't use them. I wouldn't call myself a guru or, I mean, I guess I am an instructor, a teacher of sorts, but I wouldn't call myself any kind of, cult followings or anything that comes along with any of that. But I certainly like to remind people that they are empowered with the use of their own nervous system, their own tools. And what happens is we lose our empowerment when we start to subscribe to the things that take us away from ourselves. When we drink, for instance, when we drink alcohol, we lose inhibitions, right? We feel courageous. We feel differently, which means we're feeling outside of ourselves. We're not feeling who we really are. We're feeling this avatar of the substance. We're feeling, I'm more courageous now, and I need that, which is a false pretense. Do you really need that to be able to talk to a woman in public? Do you really need to not feel like yourself? Or have you not embodied what makes you really special? You don't believe that you are really special. You don't believe that you have the courage. That's what ice baths do. They really say, you know what? I am courageous. I did come out of that potentially lethal environment. I did feel better afterward, which is a more genuine sense of satisfaction and a more genuine sense of our own courageous self. Call it the peaceful warrior, the peaceful warrior, which is talked about by Dan Millman and Paulo Coelho. They both talk about the peaceful warrior.
Amazing. Ryan, thank you so much for all these amazing tips and helping to empower
Sure.
people to empower themselves. And just thank you. Do you have a website that people can go to?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a landing page. I think the easiest way for people to remember me, I like people to follow me on Instagram, which is really great. So if you wanted to follow me, it's just Ryan Bean Yoga on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the social media platforms. And on there, I have my landing page. My landing page has it's a Popple tool that I use for my landing page, but it's all there. And it has my podcast on there. It has my TED Talk, all the different places in which I teach, like Insight Timer, the Source, which is a breathworking app. All the places I teach are all on there, and that's probably the best way to connect with me. Because if you're interested in my retreats and the things that I do, it immediately, if you click the link that's in my bio there on my Instagram or TikTok or the Facebook, what it does is it takes you to say, hey, I would like more information from you, which is my newsletter. And I produce a monthly newsletter that says, I'm up to this retreat, I'm going to this place. I'm going to be in Tennessee, I'm going to be in New Hampshire, I'm going to be in wherever I'm at, and you want to come see me. So those who are interested can follow along through the stories through Instagram, which I think has been a pretty a good tool for me to guide others to my different websites. I mean, we do have another website called the Language of Breath Collective. They can go there, which is a nice place for breath work. But if you're interested in just simply talking to me and saying, hey, I learned about this thing, sending a direct message on Instagram is usually the fastest way. I spend a lot of time off grid, and I usually will check in to there before before I look at text messages and so forth. I'm like, all right, we're back on grid. I'm going to upload a new story. I'm going to do a thing. So usually I put what I'm doing on there, but trying to think if I had any other things coming up. But there's a lot of yoga festivals that I'm involved with this summer, which I'll be posting stuff there. One's called the Zion Yoga Fest, another one called Yin on Fire. And those are all here in Southern Utah. I reside in Southern Utah, so I'm in mountain time, but I do travel all over the world teaching. So, those who are interested in, I do one-on-one mentorships or group mentorships online, but also a lot of traveling. I get called to all parts of the world to teach, and I really enjoy it, whether it be breath work, which is something I obviously enjoy. It's become sort of my dharma, my duty to teach that, my dharma. But I am, 3 or 4 days a week teaching yoga, and I really enjoy teaching people how to reconnect to their bodies through movement and through what I call a trauma-informed yoga. So we do instead of a hot power yoga, which most people would avoid unless they really like that thing. Trauma-informed yoga is really saying, I do want to reconnect to that source of me through movement. I want to use my body because that's what I know
Mhm.
to connect to a deeper place in me. So, and I do that through yoga practices, and I teach a lot of retreats at those. I'll be down in Mexico in April teaching, and a few other places throughout the world. But those who are interested, if they're interested in those, or journey spaces, we do host journey spaces here in Utah that I'm facilitate ceremony with, and they can connect to me through the Instagram or um, um, clicking on those links. It does have an email for me, which is just ryantylerbean@gmail.com. And that's the best way to if you just say, hey, I want to write a long email to you and let you know what I thought about it. I listened to your talk or whatever. That's probably a better way. So just sending me an email.
Great. Well, I want to thank all our listeners and remind you to upgrade to VIP to keep these recordings. And everybody have a great day. See you. Come back tomorrow for the next recording.